Vice presidential candidate Tim Walz was recently interviewed on Fox News and wasn't taking the bait on a question about abortion.
You signed the bill that makes it legal through all 9 months. Is that a position you think Democrats should advocate for nationally?
Look, the vice president and I have been clear. The restoration of Roe versus Wade is what we're asking for.
But that law goes far beyond Roe v. Wade.
To make her own choice. The law is very clear. It does not change that. That has been debunked on every occasion.
But wait, let's agree. What you signed is there's not a single limit through 9 months of pregnancy. Roe had a trimester framework that did have limits through the pregnancy. The Minnesota law does not have that.
This puts the decision with the woman and her health care providers. The situation we have is when you don't have the ability of health care providers to provide that, that's where you end up with a situation like Amanda Zaworski in Texas, where they are afraid to do what's necessary. This doesn't change anything. It puts the decision back on to the woman, to the physicians.
Okay, so Walz did a pretty good job there because, again, they're trying to bait him with this question of, oh, but in Minnesota, you signed a law that allows abortion up to the moment of birth. That's because sometimes complications happen, and a woman, in order to save her life, has to have an abortion. Again, it's not like, it's not like you have a situation where a woman's pregnant for 8 months, perfectly healthy fetus, right? That is, viable, whatever. And she decides, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to get an abortion. Just because I don't, I just feel like it. That's not what happens, okay? And whenever Republicans try to paint, this late-term abortion as that, they grossly mischaracterize the situation in which this actually happens. The vast majority of abortions happen within the first trimester, okay? And again, the vast majority of abortions that happen in the later months of pregnancy has to do with saving the life of the mother. The issue with these rules here, these laws passed in red states, is that they're very unclear because the people writing these laws have no idea what the F they're doing, what they're talking about. And so it ends up with a situation where you have doctors that don't see a clear, explanation of what they're supposed to do in these situations. And so they're like, I can't do anything. My hands are tied. I'm not going to go to prison for this. And then the woman either ends up dying, nearly dying, and then suffering some other health impacts of this, or, eventually she's able to get cleared to get an abortion in order to save her life. So that's what happens here, right? Now, here's the thing, too. Before the end of Roe, all the states had to follow Roe, which was the trimester limit that she brings up, okay? That permitted the regulation of abortions. Now, since the state claimed to have a compelling interest in regulating abortion, but without Roe, states can do whatever they want. Again, we've mostly talked about states that have went in a very draconian direction, doing all sorts of limits on abortion. Minnesota went the other way. They said, okay, we're not interested in regulating this. Really, we don't have a compelling interest here. This is not the state's job. This is between a woman and her doctor, and I think that's the correct position, right? Now, that said, I'm aware that most of the country does not agree with that position either. They agreed with the previous position, which was Roe. That was the compromise. You have to understand, that was the compromise position. If you support some regulation of abortion, past certain trimesters, okay, codifying Roe would be your best bet. That's why the majority of the country is not happy with the Supreme Court rolling it back. Now, that said, I want to go with a little bit more of this interview with Walz.
Donald Trump's asking for a nationwide abortion ban.
Wait, he
and
has
again,
said that
we don't see this as a winning
repeatedly
campaign.
That he will not sign a national abortion ban. Are you calling that it's a flat-out lie?
Yes, of course. And Senator Vance has in the past said so too. Now look, they may see this as an election issue. We see it as a right of women to make their own bodily decisions. And that's what the states like my state have the ability to put that in. States like Georgia force women to cross the border, and then we have a death of Amber Thurman. So let's be very clear. Trying to cut hairs on an issue on this is not where the American public's at. They want the restoration of Roe versus Wade. Vice President Harris said she would sign it. That's what we'll do when we're elected.
But to be clear, the Minnesota law is far beyond Roe v.
Yeah, but the Minnesota law, though, the Minnesota law, guess what? It wouldn't matter if Roe was in effect. See, federal law supersedes state law on that issue, okay? Because, again, Roe was a constitutional issue dealing with the right of privacy, okay? So if you point at it, it's a distraction, period. That's it. I mean, why are you trying to say, oh, but the Minnesota law wouldn't matter if you put Roe back in, okay? Donald Trump and the conservative Supreme Court, they put the genie out of the bottle, all right? And now you're going to sit there and complain about it when a state actually goes and protects the right of abortion and says it's not our business to get in between a woman and her doctor. That is not big government's job. And you know what, Walz, I mean, he did a really good job there, but I would just ask, why do you want the government to get in between a woman and her doctor? Why are you advocating for that? I remember when you were trying, to go after Obamacare to try to get rid of that. And your argument was, well, how dare you let the government get between a person and their doctor? Well, that's exactly what they're doing here, okay? Government inserting itself in between a woman and her doctor in a very intimate decision on whether or not she wants to give birth. That's kind of an important issue, okay? But again, if you're pointing that at that Minnesota law or these specific state laws, and saying, well, your position on abortion is so extreme. His position is, hey, we're going to put Roe back, which has the trimester system. Again, complete and utter distraction. Now, on to Donald Trump, right? Remember, Donald Trump, he's like, oh, I'm not going to do an abortion ban. Oh, no. Really? Do you trust that guy? He lied over 30,000 times during his administration. It's not really a jump to think that Donald Trump might be lying this time when he says, oh, I'm not going to sign it. Especially as Walz correctly points out, that for Trump, it's an election issue. He doesn't actually care about it. He's not a pro-life person. Again, this is the guy who took out a full-page ad, right, saying that the Central Park Five should get the death penalty. You want to talk about, even though they were innocent, they were exonerated. So they're the exonerated five, okay? He says, I'd kill him anyway. I'm pro-life. No, you're not. No, you're not. It's a campaign issue. It's a campaign issue. And the reason that Donald Trump is suddenly like, oh, I'm moderating on this issue, it's because it's a big issue for the country. Republicans have lost on this issue. They have lost every abortion-related ballot measure, including in states like Kansas, Kentucky, and Ohio. He knows it's a losing issue to be anti-choice. That's why, again, in his rhetoric, he's like, well, what I did, I gave it back to the states so the states could decide. But now your campaign is like, look at what they did in Minnesota. Oh, they made such terrible choices. Oh, abortion up to the moment of birth, which, again, is just not true. That's just not true. No, the reason Trump's doing this is because Americans like freedom, bodily autonomy, and they don't like the extreme Republican position, and so that's why they're trying to cast Minnesota right now as, oh, you guys are the real extremists. And thankfully, Walz wasn't having it. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, subscribe, hit the bell icon in order to get notified whenever a new video is released. And if you want to support independent, progressive media through this difficult time where it seems like everybody is shutting down, you can become a member on our YouTube page, you can become a subscriber on Facebook, or you can go to my Patreon. It's patreon.com/Jeff Waldorf. Thank you.